Hey everybody, welcome back to another crash course video where I just very briefly build a deck without going into too much detail into all the options, so don't be surprised if I leave out a unit or something that you may think is very worth using. In any case, logistics tab. You basically always see that, it's infantry CV is always good to have, and Panthers of course amazing. This is typically not necessarily considered to be enough for 1 versus 1. So if you think 7 CVs are fine, that's great. Because running 5 logistics cards is, not necessarily what Eurocorps wants. Because it is actually a fairly AP heavy deck, so to speak. But very often you see like this, or this. For the purposes of this video, I will build it like this, but of course, at the end of the day, you have to know yourself how many CVs you really need. If you want, you can use the cheap CV. I just recommend don't doing it, but at the end of the day, you decide yourself. Infantry tab has some variations in there. The Martyr 2 is not even a must-have these days. I still think it's worth using, but it's not really must-have because very often you have the AMX 10 around anyway to deal with light vehicles, but I think it's still very much worth using. Just a nice fire support vehicle, and to deal with this, the enemy essentially has to get a tank, or you have to drive into the enemy infantry. But it's not like a 2 armor IV or something that you can very easily deal with like a helicopter or something, rocket propelled helicopters, so it's nice to have. Must have Leech 90, preferably in the VAP T20, if not in the basic VAP, but definitely in the ground transport. One of the best shock infantry squads in the game, I think. Probably second only to Falski Mega 90 in my eyes, because I think getting those 5 extra men for 5 points is definitely worth it on Eric's squads. But still though, definitely ridiculously strong. Some people like to run Remade 5 in the Panther, certainly a good choice. I would suggest to not do it if you also run the Martyr 2, because then you have 2 cards of very expensive shock infantry. But at the end of the day, once again, you decide yourself. These days, I run a card as well of them in the VAP T20. Just, to be able to deal with those medium tank spams. The Appelas in this current meta is just very, very strong. 23 APs, essentially just the threshold to deal with stuff like Wilkes and M84As. And still be able to at least triple tap K1s. For spam infantry, I started running reservists. With Remade 5 and Leech 90, I have 2 cards of strong shock infantry. They're not gonna be, with these transports and such, too efficient against fighting infantry in like towns, but it's generally not really Eurocorps strength, unless maybe you use Falchi Mega 90, which you can. I wouldn't necessarily suggest. You can also run like base chasseur in the 5-pointer. It's also very often seen. Chasseur 85, but having this as your cheapest infantry can be a bit, annoying because it's not that cheap anymore. Some people like to run the Commander Marine in the Panther, even more expensive than Remind the Panther, and you only get 6 per card, so I wouldn't definitely not use this on top of the Martyr 2. And typically you see the Milan 3 in the VAP, or maybe in the Panther, or Milan 1s in the Panther. If you want your Panther fix but don't want the Remade 5 in the Panther or the Commander Marines, you can use the Milan 1s, or even Milan Div 2s if you want to. Milan Div 1s in the VAP T20 can also be fun. Lots of choices here with the Milans. I'm just gonna put in this for now. Support tab, you don't really need to, but you probably should run 5 cards. LRM is kind of a must. It's just high-end. AGMRS is just broken. For your radar A, of course, Roland. You can up or down with it. I prefer to up with it. And because usually it's not that close to the front line, because you have the Krutal and the Gepard for it, so it's not that easy to lose. Speaking of Krutal, also a must. Very, very strong unit. Some people only run the Crutalis, they're only missile AA, and then like a Gepard on top of that. You can also do that, it's up to you. This is what I like to run. All of the Gepards are worth it. Especially the A1 and the base Gepard have very, very good availability. The A2 not so much, but A1 and base, incredible availability, so definitely up with them. For mortar, the HS30 is just very, very strong, of course. Some people like to run the Cesar, but I think giving up the LRM is just way too costly, indirectly speaking. Opportunity cost. Leclerc, very good super heavy for 1 versus 1s because you can very easily deal with, like not very easily, but deal with mediums a lot better than other super heavies. It's also very fast, just be aware that it has low side armor. 2A4 is a good heavy as well, and then just a 2A1, while it isn't an amazing medium, it gets the job done. Typically you don't really need the 2A1s as much as you need a 2A4, I reckon, because very often the stuff that the 2A1 has to deal with, you can sometimes also just deal with using AMX 10s. Tank type AMX 10 of course also worth using. Tiger, sadly a must have, the stealth is just broken. Hopefully I don't need to elaborate on that. AMX 10 of course, you can of course run 2 cards, how many you want, but 1 is a must in my eyes. I like to run the AMX 3090 on top of that for some fire support, with its incredible rate of fire, and a Commando Spada in the VAP D20 for my recon infantry. Typically I'd also run the cannon, but as you will see, I don't have the activation points for this specific deck. Helicopter tab, because we would have 2 activation points left otherwise, I'm going to run 2 helicopters. The Tiger Hab. Both of the Tigers sort of overlap with the Recon Tiger, of course, but if I had to put in one of them into my 1v1 decks, it would probably be the Hab, because in the anti-air duties, the Recon Tiger is not as good, not nearly as good as the Tiger Hab, whereas the Tiger Head, of course, carries the same hot 2s, just more of them. The Tiger Hab also is, better in the multi-role I guess, because it has a lot more snaps. Both of them, of course, have the Giat, and you have like typically 2 cards of Peace Shrines as well for your anti-tank capabilities. And then the Kasabi, just for some cheap, amazing autocannon helicopter. It's very, very strong helicopter for all-round purposes. Base defense, offensively, defensively, you name it. Air tab, KWS, essentially the best ASF you can get, like the best ASF card. And like I said, 2 cards of Peace Run is pretty common, and because I like to run a 4th bank card, in this case the Jaguar, I couldn't put in, a 5th recon without, having to sacrifice both helicopters as well. Otherwise, I could sacrifice both of them to put in like a Gazelle cannon, but I don't think that's worth it. But those are of course just some suggestions. At the end of the day, you decide yourself. If you want more ASFs, both the Mirage and the Rafale, upgraded as well, are certainly valid options, but KWS is definitely the best, and you should always put that in. Super Dart can work because it does one-shot medium tanks up to 16 armor. It's just semi-active, so if you want maybe a card of Peace Runs or maybe a card of Super Darts, you may want to do that. HE bombers aren't amazing in this deck, but if you want one, IDS can do the job. F1CT is an acceptable cluster plane, but I think the Peace Runs are just going to be more consistent. And they're also very good in the multi-role role. ECR, if you want Seed, I would run the ECR for team games. For 1v1s, it's a bit too expensive for my taste, but it does have the stealth and 50% ECM. It might actually be the better choice these days. That's it. That's Eurocorps. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff you can do in the infantry tab and support tab, so just gonna give you some pointers there. But the core units are of course Tiger, AMX 10, KWS, Peace Rhines, LRM, Crotal, Legion 90, the same stuff. So yeah, in case you never played Eurocorps or don't know what to put in, which is unlikely, this should hopefully help. And yeah, I'll hopefully see you next time. Later.